want to point out is something which is too often overlooked, which are the commonalities between our rural communities and our inner city communities, and talk about some of the specific advantages they have and some of the challenges that they both face that are exactly the same. First off, our rural communities. Iowa's rural towns and counties continue to lose population. This has been an inexorable fact since, in fact, 1890. We have a number of counties in Iowa, rural counties, that have lost populations, not 1990, 1890, every decennial census since the frontier closed. Today we have rural counties. Adams County has 4,000 population, and I don't want to pick on them, beautiful county seat there, Greenfield, but along Adams and a number of small rural counties actually had fewer votes cast in the 2010 election than one precinct in Johnston in an urban area in Iowa. So these areas are small and getting smaller. In fact, Iowa has 952 cities totally, of which 499 have less than 500 residents. And if you think about that for a minute, you realize that the median size of an Iowa city is less than 500 people. We have got 671 of our 950 cities have populations less than 1,000. One time these were much larger, almost all much larger places, but they continue to lose population. The result of all that population loss is an oversupply of houses, an oversupply of commercial properties, bank buildings, schools, other public buildings, infrastructure. The average price today, the average price of an existing home in rural Iowa today is $43,000, and that would be very likely a two-story house with a nice lot and a driveway. Those are depressed prices. In 2010, as I said, more votes were cast in one precinct in Johnston than in several rural counties in Iowa. I'm sorry that this is so small, and I'll talk you through what some of this says, because that same exact population loss and the oversupply of built infrastructure is exactly the same thing is true in many of our central cities and our inner cities as true in our rural communities. If you look at this, I'll just talk you through this if you can't see it. You'll see that this is the Iowa's 7 largest cities in 1960, okay? That's 50 years ago. And since 1960, in the last 50 years, right across the middle of that, you'll see the state. You'll see that the population of the state of Iowa has grown by 288,000 people in the last 50 years, the entire population. That's an average annual growth of the entire state's population of 0.2% annual growth for the state. I think a lot of people would assume that the cities have had the growth and that the rural areas have had slower growth. But that's not really completely true. This is the 7 largest cities in 1960, and you'll see there that Sioux City, in the last 50 years, has lost 6,000 population. Waterloo has lost 3,000 population. City of Des Moines, in 1960, had 5,500 more people than we had in the 2010 census. Dubuque has really stayed steady, virtual steady, no growth, 0.04% annual growth. Council Bluffs and Davenport have grown slightly faster than the state average. That is, they have grown at really right at the state average, 0.2% growth in the last 50 years annually. Only the city of Cedar Rapids has had any significant growth. So the outflow of population from our rural areas, the same thing is true in our central cities, and if you really go down and focus it on the inner city precincts, some of the things we've heard so much about today and seen pictures of, the commercial districts in our urban areas, you'll find out that the older parts of our inner cities, that is the north side of Des Moines, or the west side of Sioux City, or the east side of Waterloo, or the west end of Davenport, or the Czech Village area of Cedar Rapids, all those areas have continued to lose population and continue to be overbuilt with infrastructure and housing and buildings just exactly the same as our rural areas. Now, this dire story that I'm painting is obviously not the entire story of the state of Iowa. Iowa has had numerous communities which have been born since 1960 and which have grown at a rapid pace and are really very beautiful places. These suburban areas and places that have grown so beautifully have everything is new, the infrastructure is new, the houses are new and they're a little bigger and the lots are a little bigger. The shopping, they have destination shopping, they've got low prices where all of us are driven to grow and to want to move and shop and live and work. And furthermore, biggest advantage may be that they've got parking where we never have to walk more than 600 feet to get to the door. One of the most important values there are the schools, brand new schools which have new labs and new everything, new gyms and new everything about them. One of an economic developer from eastern Iowa who works with a company who has to recruit PhDs from all over the globe on a regular basis and is always reaching out across the globe to recruit people to Cedar Rapids, in fact, told me once that one of the biggest selling points of attracting a PhD and her or his family to Cedar Rapids are the great school systems we have here in Iowa. And so what they do is when the family comes to visit, they talk to them about the schools, they talk to them about the amenities, they take them down and drive them past the school, and the school building it looks like hell. The school building is 60, 80 years old and has had very little invested in it, and it just does not really tell the story. So one of the big advantages of the communities which are growing and where everything is new are those beautiful schools. And in our older cities and in our rural communities, the vast majority of the state, it leaves a completely different impression in our schools. The question we have to ask about these areas which are growing rapidly with population and adding a lot of jobs and adding a lot of commercial space and adding a lot of housing is that really growth? And is it really growth if it's just moving from someplace 30 miles away to this place? The people over at the Downtown Resource Center at the Iowa Economic Development Authority, which is what it's called now, like to tell this story, and that is in the decade of the 1980s, that is from 1980 to 1990, this was the farm crisis, and Iowa lost exactly 137,000 people. So we had 137,000 less in 1990 than in 1980. During that same decade, commercial space in Iowa doubled. Now, it's really in long-term economics of development of housing and of commercial space is that it really over the long term, it really needs to be absorbed. That is at approximately the same growth rate over a long term as what the population's growing. But in that decade, while we lost population, commercial space doubled. From 1990 to 2000, we gained back almost exactly, just slightly more than the population that we lost in the 1980s. So at the end, in 2000, we had the same population that we had in 1980, but during the 1990s, the commercial the commercial buildings in Iowa space doubled again. So by 2000, we had where the population was the same as it was in 1980, we had 4 times more commercial and retail space in the state of Iowa. This puts incredible pressure, downward pressure on the housing values and on the building values and our rents in our rural areas and in our inner cities. The suburbs have tremendous advantages. Urban areas and rural areas have advantages, but our suburban areas have the advantages of green fields and versus the brown fields. Green fields, which are inviting to developers because the lots can be laid out exactly the size for the housing and the subdivisions that are going in there. There is nothing, there's no brownfields or chemicals or infrastructure underlying. There's no surprises underground. When you get a piece of green ground and you're going to build on that, you know exactly what you're getting. There are no surprises. When you're finished building it, the infrastructure, the sewers, the water, the streets, everything is brand new and nothing's going to go wrong with that infrastructure for 50 to 100 years. Everything looks new and modern. That's really very appealing. The schools are new. The big box retailers are selling at discounted prices. The brand name franchises are advertising everywhere and drawing a lot of people to that. And the medical services are increasingly specializing and coming together, and there's areas of our suburbs where almost all the medical and dental and professional and clinical services have really all moved to one place. These are all really appealing. We all want to go to where the most modern and best specialists are at. We want to go and shop at where the prices are the lowest. We want to build and we want to invest in places where we think everything is going to appreciate, not depreciate. That's not at all a dire picture for our rural and urban areas. They have tremendous advantages. For one, the most modern theory about urban development is something that was referenced earlier, and that's the new urbanism. And in the new urbanism is characterized by mixed incomes of people and families living there, mixed uses of retail, housing, offices all going together. And as it turns out, Iowa's rural communities, especially our county seats and our downtowns and urban areas, were before a new urbanist was cool. That is what we have. We have got the trends of the future lying there. While we don't have new infrastructure in these places, we have existing infrastructure. While the built environment is there, the spaces are smaller, they are more affordable for small businesses, microenterprises, and small business owners and sole proprietors. And what they have are buildings, like you've seen so many pictures of today, and Mike Nelson deserves a lot of credit for how much he's preserved, that are authentic, even historic, and again, small business owners where you can know the people who own the store. What the state needs to do, the state of Iowa is rich in these small towns and these main streets and these commercial districts and downtowns, and what we need to do to take advantage of this wealth is that we need to have policies and programs which favor a value other than just low price and just everything being new, but a value which is on preservation. We really need to recognize the value of the preservation of housing, of existing buildings, of existing neighborhoods, and offering both incentives and financing that can make preservation, which can compete. If you've seen many of the buildings we've seen today in neighborhoods, those neighborhoods are just as appealing as any of the new neighborhoods. We need to be way more welcoming to immigrants, both in our rural area and into our center cities. When you think about the loss of population in our rural areas, so many young people moving out, those young people can be replaced and in fact grow and being more inviting to immigrants. If you take a look at the small towns, Denison, Storm Lake, Perry, West Union, those small towns which are growing, they're growing because they've welcomed immigrants, and that has tremendous the affordability of those communities offers tremendous advantages. And perhaps most important to my interest now, and that is it offers affordable spaces for small businesses and family-owned businesses, and that is a large part of the charm that attracts people to our cities and our inner cities. Again, I want to thank you for this opportunity. I've enjoyed this very much, and I'm looking forward to talking to you all more.